We'll get started. And before we jump into the meditation, I want to welcome everyone that's new. Welcome back, everyone else that's returning. And ask you to reflect on your intention, your motivation. Just that simple question of like, why am I practicing meditation today or these days? Where, if you're brand new, you're kind of coming with some hopes and intentions and aspirations. And if you've been practicing for some time, maybe that has shifted from what got you on the cushion in the beginning or in the early days or early years. And then you have to check in, like, why am I continuing to practice? What is my intention, aspiration, motivation for practice? And then also just taking a moment to acknowledge, not even needing to meditate, but just to check in of the current state of mind. How are you feeling? Not what you would say to somebody on the street if they said, how you doing? Where you just say, I'm fine. But actually looking at your mind for a moment. What kind of mood's present? How's your body feeling? Energy? Attitude? Sort of inner sense of well-being or stress or excitement, fear. What's present for you what are you bringing into the meditation? Right? We have our aspirations of I want to be peaceful, but then we can acknowledge I actually feel quite angry right now, and I'm going to meditate with anger, or I feel quite scared, or I feel excited, or whatever's present in this moment. So having established that, let's meditate together. Find a way to sit that's upright, relaxed, stable, comfortable, at least to begin with. And when you're ready, allowing your eyes to be gently closed. Whatever your aspiration for your practice is, I do believe that bringing the intention to be kind, friendly, what we call loving kindness, metta, bringing the attitude of unconditional friendliness and patience, acceptance to ourselves will benefit us, will help our practice in so many ways. So begin with friendliness and kindness, patience. From this positive intention, establishing mindfulness in the body. First foundation of mindfulness. And relaxing any tension that you can, softening the eyes, the jaw, shoulders, chest, belly. In our present experience, we all have a mind that thinks, ears that hear, eyes that see, nose, tongue, smell, taste, body that feels. We are all connected in this human is human condition, experiencing incarnation, life, sounds passing by, thoughts floating through, emotions coming and going, all of the sensations of our body, the physical form. We spend the first few minutes with the simple practice of mindfulness of the breath, letting everything else be in the background, the sounds, the thoughts, even the other sensations. We choose to place our attention on the breath. The Buddha's straightforward instruction was breathing in, one knows I breathe in. And breathing out, one knows I breathe out. I would elaborate on that instruction by encouraging you to find the sensations that the breath creates and to receive the in-breath, the exhale, with non-judgmental, present time, kind awareness. Each breath, receive, feel it. Of course, our attention doesn't stay with the breath and we get drawn back into thinking, future, past. We don't need to stop the mind, but we can stop engaging in planning, remembering. Keep coming back to the body sitting, breathing, over and over, returning with this friendly attitude, being patient, persevering. If you're new to mindfulness practice, you can keep using the breath as the anchoring object of awareness. But the Buddha's instructions expand to awareness of the whole body, this body as the four elements, this body as its parts, skin and bone, organs and tissues, fluids. Opening to include the other sense doors, the sounds and images, thoughts. Inclusive awareness, present time, non-judgmental, kind presence with the arising and passing, the impermanent nature of each breath, each sensation, each thought, every sound and emotion coming and going, known by consciousness. When something calls for your attention, a thought or a sound, connect, direct your attention to that thought and observe it as it changes and eventually dissolves. And that sound as it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. As we receive our thoughts, sensations, emotions, we pay attention to the unfolding, the arising and passing. We can also identify the feeling tone, second foundation, what is perceived as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And sometimes this is quite obvious. The body becomes uncomfortable from sitting still, or there are difficult emotions, thoughts of craving or aversion that are painful. Sometimes it's not so obvious. When you find yourself drawn towards an experience, a thought, or even if it's just the breath that you're hanging out with, try to become aware. What's the feeling tone? Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? How's it changing? The impermanent pain in your knee, or thought in your mind, the pleasant, impermanent memory, emotion, rising and passing through. Paying attention in this way teaches us to see how we create suffering based on our aversion to pain, our clinging to pleasure. It begins to teach us to tolerate pain, to see it as impermanent, to learn to be more merciful and compassionate with our own unpleasant thoughts and feelings, sensations. To relinquish, to let go of our tendency to cling. We see how it happens all by itself, that it's not so personal. It's not your fault you hate pain, get attached to pleasure. It's just what this human mind does, body, all by itself. Mindfulness brings it into awareness. It's an intervention. I want to talk tonight about clinging to views and opinions. So first of all, inviting us all to just reflect a little bit on what are some of the views that you hold? What are some of your big views that you're really sort of attached to being right about? How about religion? Views about religion, about spirituality, about Buddhism is the best, everyone else is delusional. What kind of Buddhism is the best? About politics. Got some views about politics, some opinions about who's right, who's righteous, who's delusional, who's ignorant. What we should do. You got some opinions about what should be done about this coronavirus pandemic? Are you an anti-masker? Are you what kind of views and opinions do you hold? What do you think? And also really, what are some of the opinions that you really cling to, that you're just sure you're right about? And also as a thought experiment, can you remember something that you used to believe, that you were sure, that you were really attached to, a view, an attitude, maybe a religious belief you had, or a political stance that you took? And now you look back and you're like, I can't believe I was so ignorant. I can't believe I used to believe that shit. You have any humility, where you're just humbled? You're just like, wow, I can't believe I was under that delusion. I used to believe, but now I know for sure that I was wrong about that. But I'm pretty certain that I'm right about this current opinion. You following me? You following me at home? So there's a few places, and I'll read a quote from a sutta. There's a few places where the Buddha is encouraging to not cling to fixed views, and makes really bold statements about how this is a path that is not saying you have to believe it, but come see for yourself, worthy of investigation. And Buddhism, which I love, often is filled with these contradictions, and so just thinking about this topic, thinking about how traditionally the Eightfold Path, the Four Truths, right? Like here is what is true. Suffering is a truth. The cause of suffering is our clinging, our craving, our aversion, our self-centeredness. That is a truth. Freedom from suffering is possible in this lifetime. This is presented, this is a truth. Capital T, the Dhamma. Reality is there is suffering. And it doesn't, it's not like this is a view or an opinion. This is presented as the truth. This eightfold path, the way that it's traditionally translated is there is a right way to live. There's a right way and therefore a wrong way. There are correct views, right views, and there are wrong views. There is right speech and there is wrong speech. There's right action, there's wrong action. There's a right way to be mindful and there's a wrong way to be mindful. I guess when you're not mindful, it's the wrong way. There's so all of the eightfold path, understanding reality, intentions, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, traditionally is all presented as, here is the right way to live. If you want to experience the third noble truth, if you want nirvana, if you want freedom, if you want liberation, if you want to be awake, here's the right way to do it. And I've seen in my own practice, certainly in the early years, but still all of these ways that then I can get attached to my Buddhist views. There's a right way. I'm doing it the right way. They're doing it the wrong way. And sitting with this other perspective where the Buddha says, but don't cling to it. Don't cling to your views and your opinions. They're not worth suffering about. Because if you cling to them, you're going to suffer and you're going to end up fighting with other people that have and you're going to have judgment and you're going to have an inflated sense of I'm right, they're wrong. So here's part of quotes from the Sutta Nipata from the Buddha. Words of the Buddha. This I do now declare. After investigation, there is nothing among all doctrines that such a one as I would embrace. So he's just coming out the gate and he's like, I've looked at all of the doctrines, religions, philosophies, and there's nothing out there that I would embrace, he says. I checked out Hinduism, I checked out whatever else was around in his time. I checked out the nihilist philosophers and the eternalist philosophers and the, yogic suttas. And he's like, and I'm not buying any of that shit. I wouldn't embrace any of it. He says, seeing misery in philosophical views without adopting any of them, searching for truth, I discovered inward peace. So this is all part of Siddhartha's story. He said, I wanted freedom, so I went out to try to learn it. And I learned all of the spiritual philosophies that were available in India 2,600 years ago, whatever he could find. He said, I studied it. None of it did I embrace. None of it made enough sense. He said, and without adopting anybody else's views, spiritual teachings, I found inner peace. Not by any philosophical opinion, not by a tradition, not by knowledge, not by virtue and holy works can anyone say that purity exists, nor by absence of philosophical opinion, by absence of tradition, absence of knowledge, by the absence of virtue and holy works either. Having abandoned these, without adopting anything else, let one, calm and independent, not desire any resting place. So I know it's a little convoluted, but he's saying without clinging to anybody else's map of reality, anybody else's views or opinions, let us come to rest in our own, what's he call it? Freedom from desire, craving, and a resting place. That there's a relaxation in not clinging to philosophy, tradition. One who thinks oneself equal to others or superior or inferior, for that reason disputes. But one who is unmoved under these three conditions, for that person, the notions equal, superior, and inferior do not exist. That's an interest, like check out your mind. Like when you size yourself up around other people, am I equal to this person? Am I superior? Am I inferior? You know, if you suffer from low self-esteem or inflation, kind of, you know, ego trip, narcissism, where you're either thinking you're superior or you're the ego trip of inferiority, also that self-centered, I'm the worst, is one of the most self-centered thoughts. I'm the worst. So he's saying, as long as we're clinging to the I, right? This goes back to, as long as we're clinging to the I, the me, the mine, and especially in the comparing mind, and our minds do it all by themselves, not your fault. The untrained mind shows up and sort of sizes up the situation. Am I inferior? Am I equal? Are we all equal? Everybody, do you look at every person that you can think of, that you come into contact with, as your equal? Just as intelligent, just as capable, just as wise? Or do you feel, yeah, no, some people seem to be superior, some people seem to be inferior? And part of the Buddha's awakening was to say, all of that is self-centeredness. And then, you know, for the person, but the person who is unmoved under those three conditions, for that person, these notions do not even exist. Could you imagine getting to a place in your meditation practice, where you could communicate with people and be free from that comparing mind and just be present with someone just as they are, rather than the whole sizing up dance of inferior, superior, or even equal? Equal is always bugs, you know, like when I heard this teaching, I was like, I thought equality was like what we're going for, to see everybody as capable and equal. And I believe in equality. What's wrong with equality? What do you think? What's wrong with equality? Buddha's perspective, I mean, of course, on the relative level, equality like would be so, what a radical thing that would be for our world if people were treated with equality. You know, on that, like what an amazing thing in this world of oppression, this world of racist, sexist ignorance that we live in, if we could actually see each other, you know, as equality on that grander social political, it's what so much many of us are fighting for, and people have been for so long. So what would the Buddha's problem with seeing someone as equal be? The answer is that even in equal, there's still the I am separate from you. I am a solid self, and you are a solid self, and there's still this comparing mind. You know, of course, anatta, the Buddha's teaching on anatta, who says there's no solid, there's no I here. There's no, you know, anytime you're kind of too attached to self, you're selfing and you're suffering. Even the equality, I'm the same as you. So it's just relax. Relax the whole self-centeredness dance, and just be. Don't be equal. Don't be inferior. Don't be superior. Just be present. In true presence, there is no other. There is no hierarchy or even, I know that's a little confusing, but part of the teaching. He goes on to say, the sage for whom the notions equal and unequal do not exist, would he say this is true? Or with whom should he dispute, saying this is false? With whom should he enter into dispute? An accomplished person does not, by a philosophical view or by thinking, become arrogant, for he is not of that sort. Not by the holy works, not by tradition is he led. He is not led into any of the resting places of the mind. So I was thinking, like, part of our goal, part of where the Dharma is taking us, our meditation practice, our renunciation, our awakening, is that you'll get to the place where you don't need to argue with anybody. You'll have, you'll know what you know, but you don't need to fight with people about it. It's not going to lead you to that. And again, I want to put this in the cultural and historical context that I believe, he's making these statements, but he's also traveling around India, lecturing to sometimes hundreds of people, thousands of people. And he's pretty critical sometimes of theism. He's making some pretty radical statements about the ignorance of the caste system, of racism. He's making some pretty, he's got some radical views. He's got some progressive politics. He's on the front lines, protesting, nonviolent protest against war, against violence. He's doing some pretty hardcore political activism, and his spiritual teachings are strong. This is the truth. And he's not afraid to debate. There are people that come, the Brahmins, that, all of these Hindus come to him and want to argue with him and about why he doesn't believe in the gods, why he doesn't believe in the caste system, why he has empowered women, this radical thing that he let them form a lineage of nuns. And so he's got all of these really strong, he's like, this is what's right. Here's the path to awakening. If you want to be free from suffering, do this. But almost always follows it up with, if you want. You don't have to. But if you want to, if you're coming to me for my guidance, here's what I did, and here's what you can do. And part of doing this, turning mindfulness on your own mind, you start to see that this self, I, me, mine, isn't so solid, it's just sort of it's a mirage that the mind creates of self. When you stop clinging to it so much, you still have your views and your opinions and live more in harmony with Dhamma, truth, reality. Last piece here, my favorite piece. He says, for one who is free from views, there are no ties. For one who is delivered by understanding, there are no follies. But those who grasp after views and philosophical opinions, they wander about in the world, annoying people. I'm one of those annoying people. Are you one of those annoying people? Do you have the humility to admit that you're one of those annoying people that wanders about in the world with your views and your opinions, arguing about politics and what's right and what's not right, and trying to convince people that they should believe what you believe? Now, I want to open this up for conversation, because this is part of the teaching And of course, we have to have views and opinions. The core is, maybe for me as an unenlightened being who doesn't walk around, here's how I try to embody this. And I don't do it perfectly, for sure. I'm one of more, I've been accused more than once of being arrogant and dismissive of other people's views. I can get very attached to, if it's not Theravada Buddhism, it's not true. And if it's not my perspective of Theravada Buddhism, it's not true. But here's how I try to, is try to form the reality that my current view is this. And there's like a bit of a humility in, do you ever say that, or you ever think that way? Where my current view is this, with the understanding that my views have changed so much over the years, and they continue to change. They're not fixed. My current understanding of reality is this. Some of it's an intellectual understanding of what the Buddha taught. Some of it's an embodied knowing that doesn't feel like a view or an opinion, but it's something, it's insight that has come from the practice. And being able to see the difference between what I believe and what I have directly experienced and trust. So trying to, maybe it's I was talking with a friend the other day about, what does humility mean? And just reflecting for you, is humility an important quality in your life, in your spiritual practice? In the Metta Sutta, one of the first phrases in the Metta Sutta is, about humility. He says, to be humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, that this is part of development of a friendly way of being, a loving and kind way of being, to be humble and not so self-centered. And then one of the last lines, and this is the teaching of radiating kindness over the entire world and treating all living beings as though they were your only child, really having this high level of empathy and compassion and kindness towards everyone. So with a boundless heart, one should cherish all living beings. One of the last lines is, this is said to be the sublime abiding by not holding to fixed views. By not holding to fixed views, one is liberated from the suffering that fixed views cause. Fixed views about who we are, fixed views about who other people are, fixed views about politics, religion. I've got a lot of views, a lot of opinions, and some of them are probably somewhat fixed. But it is part of my practice to try to see that and try to have a little bit more humility and less conceit and less I am for sure right and I will never change my mind about that. A little bit more like, I could be wrong. It does feel like there are some big issues that just seem like truth. I don't even think that statements like racism is always wrong. I don't feel like that's a view or opinion. That just feels like the Dhamma, like the truth. Like racism is never cool. But some people would say, well, that's your opinion, man. Maybe it's my opinion. It doesn't feel like an opinion. It feels like reality. And that people that think that racism or sexism or any sort of fascist oppression of any living being is okay, are confused beings. That they're very confused to think that these justifications for oppression, always coming from ignorance, is my view, and it's a pretty fixed view. I got to be honest about it. I don't think I'm wrong about that, but I'm also not often engaged in trying to make everyone else agree. So I want to leave it there and ask you for your thoughts and opinions about this not holding to fixed views. Does it seem like, I know I went kind of broad, but do you see some places in your life and your practice where you're suffering a bit, where maybe loosening the grip would help you not suffer so much, or maybe not annoy other people so much, cause suffering? If you have questions at home and you'd like to raise your hand, you can do it on your screen. There's a little blue hand that will, or in the chat function, and then I will call on you and I will unmute you. And if you're here in the room and you'd like to discuss any aspect of this, please, let's talk about it. Does it make sense to you?
It's a really hard time to try to, I mean, I've been very political in my life. There's been a significant period in my 20s and 30s where I was either working in activist circles, everything from consumer and environmental stuff, legislation in the state of New York. I actually got appointed to run the environmental cleanup unit for the City Parks Department at one point, because I had background in that. I always, one of the fixed views I used to have strongly was that properly constituted government should be serving the greatest number of people. And it took me a long time to accept that in the 90s, for instance, the Democratic Party basically jettisoned all pretense of doing it. That the mainstream Democratic Party, it took me a long time to accept that. It turned out like I was sharing a space in Sherman Oaks with a friend who was very conservative in many ways. And even finally, in our debates, it finally got through my head, like this old image I had of the Democratic Party was stuck somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s. And even then, they were constantly being attacked for their stance on the Vietnam War. There was a period where I stopped getting involved in politics, which did not coincidentally was when I started practicing meditation and started getting into the Dharma. But the last few administrations have either been impotent in terms of advancing things for anyone who, average working people, or just outright hostile to the great people. Certainly Bush and certainly Trump, and Trump's blatantness about everything has gotten everyone up in arms. I get confused because at times I'll look at the Dharma and, other teachers have mentioned, dividing views as a big issue, something that's been a theme in one of these talks for some time now. At the same time, the vileness of the current administration, their blatant celebration of cruelty, the actions they take, it seems to be if you are, maybe this is more of a Mahayana point of view, but if you're going to be compassionate, if we're working toward awakening, and awakening as the wings of wisdom, discernment, don't overreact, wait for the right time to do something if you're going to do something. But you also feel that at the other wing of awakening is compassion. You know, you're called to get involved again because this current crew of criminals is you know, they're robbing the country blind. It's one of the worst administrations we've seen, certainly since Harding.
I guess especially when we're talking about politics, like, you know, how do we apply this? And as I was saying,
He's very tightly.
yeah, but is there a way to do it like the Buddha did? And maybe not, because he's an awakened being and we're not. But he was out there protesting racism and oppression without clinging to it, right? Like there was out of compassion, out of true compassion, not out of hatred, not out of compassion, out of wisdom, saying like, yeah, of course we're gonna stand up for what's right here. And not you know, I'm not super attached to it, and not, you know, and most of the time he didn't succeed very well. There's that one famous time where there's an army going to attack, and he goes and he intercedes in between on the battlefield and speaks to the king, whomever is attacking, and they turn around and they march back the armies. But then when the Buddha and the Sangha, when the community leaves, they just go back later and wipe out everybody. So, you know, it's like he tried. And so I feel like there's a part of our tradition is, yeah, try to make a positive change with discernment, with, you know, like try to create a positive change, try to speak out, but don't suffer a lot about the reality that we live in a realm of ignorance. And, you know, our idealism, especially about American politics, especially about, you know, you're talking about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, or, you know, like with the history of slavery and genocide of the Native American people, and, you know, on this, you know, this country that's founded on racism and ignorance and oppression and theft and violence, thinking like, oh wait, this is supposed to be like for everybody. It's like, no, this is a realm of ignorance. This whole world is a realm of ignorance, and this country is a special, you know, with all of our idealized political statements, like you're saying, that are not practiced at all. Especially in the two-party system, you know, like anyways, just like having too much, we got to be careful for our delusion that like there's a political solution to the reality that the karmic momentum of ignorance is so strong here on planet Earth, here in samsara, here in the United States of samsara. That having been said, we don't want to become nihilists that don't try. Let's keep trying to create a positive change. Let's keep working for a more just society without too much clinging, out of compassion. Adriana, please.
Good question. The Buddha offers anything specifically about how you discern between a fixed view and a truth. And I know so much of Buddhism is based on self-investigation and individualistic, this, I think this is true, but investigate it for yourself. But right. I also wonder, though, what you're saying, there is kind of a right way and a wrong way. There is sila, there are the 5 precepts. Like, does he offer a certain investigation or chain of thought to know, how do I know this is true, or how do I know that this is an opinion?
Well, some of the things that he's saying here is, if it's someone else's philosophy or someone else's charismatic presentation or someone else's, and that you're kind of believing them, that there's a difference between that sort of like externalized belief. And all of his teaching is saying, until you know it for your truth, know it as a truth for yourself, don't believe anybody. There's that, you've probably heard me say before, the Kalama Sutta, where there's a group of people that everybody goes, they had the Brahmins, and they had the, all of the different teachers have been coming, the nihilists and the eternalists and the theists. And then the Buddha comes and teaches this non-theistic humanist psychology of awakening. And they say to him, why should we believe you? And he replies something like I'm saying, which is like, don't believe me until you know for yourself that it's true, till you've experienced that this leads to the end of suffering. Kind of like I was, saying in the beginning, what are the views? What are we suffering about? What are the views and opinions that we're fixed, that we're clinging to, that we're suffering about? What if we maybe didn't change our mind, but just brought a little humility to the process of, this is what I believe, but I could be wrong. So some of it's the external, between the difference between an external source of information and an internal practice-based experience. Now I think I know where the question's coming, because it's quite difficult, because we're still have to rely on our own mind. And what of my thoughts are views and opinions, and what of my thoughts are Dhamma, truth. So there's some things like anicca, anatta, dukkha, the three characteristics. When when anicca is impermanence, anatta is no permanent self, and dukkha is that everything is uncertain, unreliable, unsatisfactory. So like those three characteristics of all reality, you could believe that because you heard me say it or you read it in a book. And you get real fixed to like everything's impermanent, but not be living in harmony with, because when you really know everything's impermanent, you cling less and less, because you suffer when you cling. So knowing impermanence and living in harmony with impermanence, it's no longer an opinion that everything's impermanent. It's actually a knowing, not based on, I read that, but I see it directly. I've been meditating on it. I'm waking up to this, and it's changing the way that I react to the world. I'm not so attached. I'm not so aversive. I have more patience, more tolerance, more compassion for the pain in my life, because I know that it's impermanent. So it's that direct experience versus belief. But I don't know of anywhere where the Buddha makes a good distinction on what's the noble truth and what's just your view and opinion. Right? He didn't present it as the four noble opinions or the eightfold views. Andre, please.
Using the story that you just said about him turning back the army.
Yeah.
How did he feel the next day knowing that they came back and slaughtered everybody?
Of course, I don't know. The question at home, if you couldn't hear him, was that story about the Buddha going to the front lines and turning back the army that was attacking, and that he was successful, and that later they came and attacked anyways and killed everybody. And I was asked, how did he feel about that? And I don't know. The Buddhist answer, like the Buddha only felt compassion and equanimity, and was in acceptance of reality as it is, didn't suffer. So he would have felt a lot of compassion, both for the ignorant, violent people that committed the murders, as well as those who were murdered, right? So in full compassion, there is In full wisdom and compassion, there is compassion both for the oppressor and the oppressed, both the murderer and the murdered, because we understand karma. And so that warlord king that went and killed everybody then had all of that karma of all of that killing, all of that negativity. And so the Buddha's teaching and response is compassion for both sides.
That aside, as I understand that, there must still be some feeling of disappointment.
I don't know, but I think that if there's no self that is solid around I failed, maybe there's no experience of disappointment. But I don't know the answer. But I think it's quite possible that if you're really free from I, me, mine, self-centeredness, then you don't feel so disappointed. You just feel compassion for the world of ignorance that we live in, where people hurt each other. There's a question at home. Richard, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for the teaching.
Thank you.
So the way I think about fixed views is painting myself in the corner. And even if the corner is like really nice with a cafe table and espresso, I'm still stuck in the corner with a fixed view. I had this occasion, you said earlier, I paraphrase maybe, is that racism is wrong. And that's kind of like, seems like a fact of life. And I thought so too. I lived my whole life. I'm a white, heterosexual, male, older, and I thought my whole life, racism is wrong. It's just bad. And then I realized later that that's a fixed view. And I realized that through going into a workshop with other Dharma practitioners to look at what racism really is. And it blew my mind, because what I'm coming to look at is that I am the beneficiary of white superiority in this culture. And I've been sort of unconscious about how it works for me and doesn't work for people of color. And by their definitions in this workshop, which I haven't totally accepted yet, that I'm a racist. And it just galls me to even say that, because I don't believe that I am. But to see how it's structurally, how racism works in the society, and how I've used the privilege and even male and white superiority to my advantage, not consciously, but just by living in this culture, it really is blowing my mind about fixed views. And when I think about racism is wrong, well, I got to look at myself in the mirror and thinking how much I have enjoyed the benefits of living in this racist society as a white man. So I just wanted to throw that into the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of being open and humble and learning, and that our views can change, that education changes views, that there's all kinds of ways that we, meditation practice changes views, that just being open, not sitting, I like what you're saying, not painting yourself into the corner of, I have to believe this forever. In recovery, there's a saying that more will be revealed, and I feel like the Dharma is always like that. I heard Joseph Goldstein say one time that even after like 50 years of meditation, he still feels like there's this iceberg, and like what is conscious on the top. Like what we know about icebergs is that like 90% of them are submerged, and that only like 10%, that big ice thing that you see is only like 10% of the frozen ice. And he said, like, even after 50 years of meditation, I still feel like this, what's revealed at the top, there's so much more below the surface that I haven't even uncovered yet. So just having that humility of like, I think I'm right all of the time, but probably not. Probably more will be revealed. Okay, I'm going to try this one. I'm going to read it out loud. Thank you for the meditation and talk. Very helpful and expansive. I'm wondering about how to not cling to not having fixed views, as well as having fixed views. How to not cling to the having not fixed views route, as well as the having fixed views route. Mindfuck to articulate. Often I find myself in a state of comparison, and when I notice someone else is having a very fixed view about something, for instance, many people in my life are very attached to the idea of monogamy, and relationships that I have is not monogamous and is considered suspicious, an imbalance in power dynamic. And this difference comparison is affecting me. I recognize that this is a separation in itself is I-oriented, and thus not the actual truth of being. However, it is painful and difficult not to cling to this openness even. I'm wondering what tools you would suggest in staying present and not cling to the idea of releasing others' fixed views. It's all a riddle of a kind. Thanks for your thoughts. I don't know. I mean, yes, it was too much of a riddle, and there's too many levels to it. I get the question, sort of. And this is the question that we're all with. How do we be true to our own, having that humility of like, I could be wrong, like my views about monogamy or about polyamorous or non-monogamy, like whatever, wherever you land, like you could be wrong. And just having that humility of like, could be wrong. Where did I learn that? Why do I believe that? Is this nature for human beings? Is this religious training? What is this? And just being open to like maybe a lot of what we were taught isn't correct. But trying to change other people's views and opinions and trying to make other people open-minded is a dead end. It's worth having some conversations. It's worth having some, especially if people are open, it's worth having, it's great. Like Richard was saying, like, when people are open to learning about their own privilege and, blindness around race or around sexuality or monogamy, whatever we're talking about, it's great if they're open to it. But if somebody's closed and has a fixed view, not worth suffering about trying to make them change that. You can't, this is one of the core things of the Buddha, where he said, I can't do this work for anybody else. He said, I'm going to enlighten being, but I can't make you wise or compassionate or not attached. He's like, I'm sharing this path that led me to this experience, and I'm giving you the tools. Here's the tools: mindfulness, concentration, compassion, forgiveness, ethics, renunciation. Here's the teaching, here's the tools. You have to get there yourself. Nobody can do it for you. This equanimity is understanding everyone has their own karma. Nobody can do it for us. We can't do it for anybody else. And suffering about trying to change other people's minds. I'm big on education and trying to inspire and trying to create a positive change in whatever ways that we can. But I don't think it's going to happen through violence, and rarely, maybe through debate, through conversation, through, if people are open, then people change. But if you're holding a fixed view, you just wonder about annoying everybody. Maybe last one here. Alan says, it seems to me that extending compassion, for instance, and acting to reduce and eliminate racism, the issue is to simply be as compassionate as one can as one can be, and that we get confused when we make those kind of actions with the expectations that they will have a particular result. That's not to say that there is no intention to reduce, eliminate racism. Simply, the expectation of the desired result is where we get screwed up. We try for compassion simply because that's the way we feel we should be. I like that. Thank you, Alan. That's well said. Is that we say, yeah, let's try, but let's not suffer about the reality that we live in. We'll leave it there for tonight. I offer you these thoughts, this conversation about fixed views and opinions, and for your contemplation and reflection. And if they are useful and help you suffer less, then apply them. And if they don't feel useful, set them aside, find some practices. Stick with the mindfulness of breath for now. That'll be helpful. Send some forgiveness practice to me. That'll be helpful. Against the Stream is a nonprofit meditation center that is supported by the generosity of the people who attend these classes. So please, everything's donation-based. Pretty much everything is donation-based. So the Monday night class is done by donation. You can donate online. I see that Rachel and Joseph have put it in the chat. There's a link to the againstthestream.com website where you can make donations. We are running at a deficit. We're not quite able to pay our bills through the pandemic, and a lot of the rental income that we had went away, and classes aren't so well attended, and people tuning into Zoom don't donate the way they do when they come into the room. So please try to be generous if you can. Help us meet some of our expenses here. Suggested donation for drop-in classes, $15 to $20. And many people in our community have become monthly supporters, and that's actually been a huge help. People saying each month I'd like to give this much money, whether it's, I think some people think it's $25, $50, or $100, $108 a month. So if you aren't doing that and you can and you want to and you're moved to do that, please, that information is also in that same link, againstthestream.com. I have a 3-month course that starts in the first week in September on the Ajahn Amaro book, The Breakthrough. There is some room left in that. I think I'm going to cap it at 30 people. We've got 20-something registered. If you're thinking about registering, please do so soon. That will include a 3-hour class, one Sunday a month, and then a 30-minute check-in with me each month about the material and about your meditation practice. So some one-on-one Zoom meetings with me. Sign up if you haven't and you want to. All right, good seeing everybody. I'll see you next week. Thanks for being here, people that were here. May any goodness that comes from our practice be shared outward in all directions. May all beings find liberation, and together may we create a positive change on this planet.